what is this called? Interview. Super feature interview. Before the super feature, the interviewer is going to be a lovely Christian Jalon, a fellow, what's this thing called in English? Young Chicago Arthur's Youth Advisory Council. And we're interviewing Kush, Toaster, Diana, Jamila, RJ, Brittany, Bleu, and Fati.
My name is Kush, and sometimes I write poems, sometimes I'm an amateur painter, and then sometimes I really, really poorly practice playing harmonica.
So we named it first.
Yeah,
she already wrote for us.
just do it.
All right. My name is Toaster. I am a poet, but really, I mean, a comedian who chose the wrong medium. I am also a mural artist and MC. I do collages sometimes on my free time, and I also like to do hair.
No, he doesn't.
I was waiting for somebody to shut me up.
My name is Diana. What don't I do? I write songs. I write songs that just live in my cell phone recordings. I write poems that just stay in my notes. I run a pretty good business. I run like Proverbs. I like to sew pillows and everything else. So yeah.
Follow her on Tumblr.
Yeah. Like Proverbs. Okay.
Okay.
I am Jamila. I am a singer and a poet, and that's about it.
She's famous.
Thank you.
And that's why we're here.
Actually, we're all her body.
All of our
We are her entourage, actually. And I get to sit on the right-hand side of Jamila. Clearly, I'm winning. I'm an artist, and I'm sensitive about my stuff, but in a good way. You know, I'm a writer, and I do painting and photography, and I think a lot. Ask that question.
I'm Brittany. I follow the rules. I'm also a
This is
playwright.
not true.
I answer one thing. I'm a playwright.
And a poet.
She is answering the one question.
She follows the rules.
To like the point where it's annoying.
So you late or something?
Blue. What's your name?
My name is Bleu. I usually interrupt conversations like that. I'm a poet and sometimes I be cutting niggas' hair.
I need to. What's the association?
I'm Fati. I'm a poet and a photographer. Also, I want to shout out Krista, who's all of our mentors.
Yes.
Alright, so just to like tell how this is gonna work, I'm gonna ask each of you one question about I'm gonna ask one question to each of you, but that's after I like ask the general question, so I throw a question out there and we'll just pass it around. So, I wanna start with okay, so is there any piece that you've done in the past that was ever inspired by a student that you've taught?
My students are in the audience pointing to themselves.
Okay.
In general, I don't do a lot of writing at home because I'm like tired. So often my writing happens while my students are writing. So they usually inspire me like when they do their readings. And then I'm like, oh, that's dope. Like, oh, okay, that makes me think of something. So they actually inspire me like on a day-to-day basis because I'm pretty lazy in my free time. Wait, we all got to answer?
No,
That's going to take forever, bruh.
Okay.
Whoever has
We take too long.
I can answer that question. Yeah, so there's this girl named Erin. She went to Shoot Middle School, and I taught there. And she was just super quiet. She was this dark-skinned girl, and then she would write poems about being dark-skinned and like feeling othered and like being in a school full of white boys that didn't like her. So I barely spoke to her while I did my residency there, but she inspired me to sort of go back and think about like how I got here and the kind of middle schooler that I was. And I went and dug up some old awkward pictures, and the piece that I wrote for Crossing the Street was inspired by her. It was about me being in middle school and being awkward and feeling ugly and feeling other.
So the second question, have you ever had like a favorite poem that has been written by a student? Like, are there poems that like you could like look at a student or like think of a student and okay, Beyonce. Okay. Yeah, Bleu.
Me specifically, I had a student by the name of Antoine. Went to Deneen Elementary on 72nd and State, and one of my favorite poems of his is, so Antoine always cracked jokes in class about like old people and found a way to relate everything to old people. He liked cracking jokes on old people, and so it was this one particular poem towards the end of the program, towards the end of the program that he was writing, and it was the one piece where he finally like talked about how much he appreciated old people, and although he cracked jokes on them, it's because he just wanted to reach that level and to be one of them. And so it was just real inspiring to me, and that was one of my favorite pieces of him because he actually flipped the script and didn't give me what I was expecting at times.
Are there any poems currently that you're like looking at by other poets, poems that you're liking, favorite poems?
Fati already had this. This is Fati's question. This is Fati's question.
The best way to phrase that question is to read a poem and then she'll have like 6 suggestions for it. Which is probably
Okay, so I think that a poem that or a poet who I really, really love is Tim Siebel's. His work is incredible, and so there is these 2 poems that he has that are like literally the best poems I've ever read in my life, and one of them is called Dolores Jeffs, and the other one is called The Last Poem on Race. And that is, oh my God, like if I could ever write a poem that's like half as good as that poem, that's like my goal for every poem I write, is like to be like a quarter of as good as that poem. It's so good. So I would say look him up. I know that like he writes a lot of like narrative-based poems in a way that I think don't often seem like it. Like he kind of weaves a bunch of narratives together, and then his identity like seeps into every single poem he's writing in a very natural way. So I think he's one of my biggest influences.
I read a lot of really old stuff. But just answer the question, since this is supposed to be about like when we were in high school as well. I would say like probably, this is a bad answer maybe, but the first poem that I read that was just like, wow, it changed my whole life, was The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. I felt like reading that poem, especially the image of I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. That just was just like, as a 16, 17-year-old boy, I just felt like this is the first time I read somebody who put some words that was really just like, I felt them completely. So I like a lot of contemporary stuff too, but I think that was the first poem that was like, changed something.
does it have to necessarily be a genre, like poetry as the genre? Okay. I think King Krul is somebody I've been really getting into, mainly because like I listened to his music for like, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years without realizing that all of his lyrics were actual words. And then I looked him up. I mean, if you hear him, you know what I'm talking about. But then I looked up the words and I used it as a workshop, and I had one, like I looked at the Rap Genius, and then I like had my own concept of what I thought it meant, and I showed it to my students, and they were like, no, I got a whole different, you dig to it, and that like, since then it's just been, I would like my music and my writing to do that, to serve that purpose, to like give one person one meaning and any other person an entirely different meaning, but still be super cohesive.
Are there any current projects right now that you all are working on that you are able to speak about?
I feel like all of us picked a person.
We should apologize. We've been at LTAB since 9 in the morning. We're not all really here. Project I'm working on, I have a coffee table book coming out called Petty Expletive. We're in a safe space. It is a collection of tweets. It is a collection of tweets on race and gender and fuckboys. That offends the people I wanted to offend.
That's one Urban Dictionary away from an online apology.
What did they say?
She's with the gym. I know you have a project.
Bad projects. We all got projects.
Okay. I have an album I'm working on that's gonna be free, and
It's not like this side of the room and this side of the room has the same reaction.
We're fans too.
Yeah,
It's true.
and I was thinking about the idea of like how Afrofuturism, I don't even know, but I just found out that that doesn't mean what I think it means, so maybe not even that word, but just the idea of like imagining a better world for Black people, Black girls, people of color in Chicago, and how that often, I read a lot of things that kind of imagine that like in the future, and so trying to speak things into existence in a more present way is what a lot of the songs are trying to get at. And I'm really inspired by like Lauryn Hill's album, and yeah, just like the conversations that are kind of woven into that, and kind of want to think of bringing other voices into my project who inspire me or who I look up to kind of create that kind of feeling.
So we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna ask those one questions, and so can you please keep your responses short? So Kush, starting with you. Your amateur paintings are really, no, look, like I love them. They're self-portraits of yourself, little Black girls with pink hair. But you use cartoon characters. Like, how did you come up with that concept?
Keep it brief. So, you know, we all grew up and there would be like that one Black character on the white TV shows. So I'm currently painting self-portraits with pink hair of these cartoon characters, these very few cartoon characters. And like I just came to the realization that they were kind of one-dimensional, like they were one thing, they didn't really expand on many things. Particularly LaShawn from Bebe's Kids, she's one of my favorites, and she was so dimensional, but you only see her as like a fighter. So I want to explore like the dimensions and the vulnerability and all the good stuff that comes with being a Black girl.
As far as on my own, I do plan to release a few singles. In the spring, I'm trying to get better at promoting my other arts opposed to, because like most people here, they just know the poetry, or a lot of people didn't know I rap too, so trying to do a better job at exposing myself as an artist and on different platforms, not just one. But y'all can be looking out for some stuff to pop up in the spring, some singles and stuff like that.
2 more questions, one for Diana and one for Brittany. So, Diana, last summer you did a campaign for Black Lives Matter with your Can I Live shirts, pillows, signs, all that other good stuff. How did you come up with the Can I Live question exactly?
Well, one, it wasn't intended to be associated with like the Black Lives Matter movement. I've been saying Can I Live since forever, like that. Like my line sisters used to make fun of me all the time because I would say it all, you know, they're a real kind of judgmental, respectful kind of group, and I just feel like, can I live? Like, you know what I'm saying? Just let me cook, you know? It's cool, you know? It's cool, you don't want to, you know? It's cool if you're not about these things, but I am, so can I live? You know? And they, like, it just became this running joke, this sort of thing, and so a lot of you know, I have a blog that's a collection of Black language, a lot of colloquialisms, that's true sus. And so I just, you know, when it went viral, I was like, that's money. And but at the time, around the time that like Black Proverbs is like getting this launch and is moving on, there's also police brutality coming to the forefront. Like it's getting all this news exposure, and it just got involved with that movement, got associated with it. And because like I do very much care about service and community and giving back, and contributing to that voice is going to change this world for the future generations, I was like, well, let me figure out how this can also be something social. So I figured let's recreate these spots where Black people have been murdered by the police wearing these Can I Live shirts, or with these shirts disrupting white spaces to contribute to this conversation on where Black people really get to be free and get live. So.
Hey, D. Hey. Right, that's relaxed. So earlier on in the comments, I have so many questions to ask you specifically, but I'm gonna just ask one. I wanna ask about your book, playwriting. When did you get into that? Are you doing anything now with it?
So actually I got into playwriting, ironically, through YCA. They had this program called the Poets to Playwright Conservatory. It was a partnership. I'm sorry, I just made eye contact with Kevin. I feel like he's taking over. I feel like
He would have done that if he wasn't here.
like I'm sorry, I hate making eye contact with Kevin. It's a partnership with Victory Gardens, and it started off with like 30 people, 20 of them stopped showing up, and then the 6 of us ended up writing a play for the first time, and it was like me and other people that grew up through this program, like me, and Rachel, my friend Kiana, like a bunch of people, and then after the concert, like we broke our partnership off of Victory Gardens because they're low-key problematic, and then, as hell, but then we decided to continue writing together, called Sophisticated Cornbread. And it was just a bunch of black-ass people black-ass poets interrupting white spaces, which was our whole intent. We're not writing right now. I entered this thing, or got into this thing called like the 1 Minute Play Series, which happens yearly, which is something that I'm really interested in. Like 50 playwrights literally write a minute play, and then these actors come through and get your stuff and they act it out in these like bursts of like 10 minutes, and they do 10 different poems, and it's like one of the dopest things I've ever done. So what I'm trying to figure out now is how do I take this 1 Minute Play Series and run with it on my own time, and like what does that look like, because a 1 minute play for me is still a poem, and so right now I'm trying to figure out what does the 1 minute play thing look like for me outside of Victory Gardens, outside of all these white people that decide what's good or bad, which is mostly what theater is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.